Welcome to Combating Imposter Syndrome. This is a four-part webinar series in which we're going to learn about what imposter syndrome is, how it can affect us, and different strategies and techniques for working through those things so we can have the success that we work so hard for. My name is Sarah Huzar. I'm an intern in the Student Wellness and Counseling Center, and I will be the host of this webinar series. So this is week one. In week one, we're going to talk about the signs and impact of imposter syndrome, kind of what it looks like, how it might be affecting us, and how we can engage in more fair self-assessments. Before we get into that, I do want to let everyone who is here tonight with us, as well as anyone who is subsequently watching this webinar later, if you are struggling with anything right now, if it's imposter syndrome, if it's the pandemic, if there's something else going on, the Student Counseling and Wellness Center, we're here to support you. So if you'd like to make an appointment, the easiest way to do that is by emailing Sherry Adams. You can reach her at sherry.adams@sph.cuny.edu for an appointment at any time. So I just want to make that clear before we go ahead. So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is characterized by feeling inadequate despite evident success. So these quote-unquote imposters feel that their success really isn't due to their hard work and their dedication, it's due to luck or a mistake. And they live in fear of being found out as a fraud or being discovered that they don't really belong in whatever situation they have found themselves in. It tends to be related to work or school, but I'm sure there are other situations that people might find themselves in where they also have this feeling of imposter. This was first noted in 1978, and at that time they believed that it only really affected high-achieving women and that women were unable to internalize their successes. So interestingly, well, for a long time, about 40 years or so, we really thought it only affected women at a higher rate than men. We experience it at roughly equal rates. And even more interesting is that anywhere from 9 to 82% of people are going to experience it at some point in their life. So while imposter syndrome, people are afraid of being found out, that's actually quite a lot of people who have had this experience, but people don't really tend to talk about it because if you're worried that someone's going to discover you don't belong, you're not really likely to want to share your feelings of not fitting in or not feeling like you're belonging in that environment. But 82% of people will experience it. There are, however, some groups that are more at risk to experience imposter syndrome than others. It does include women. It also includes racial and cultural minorities. It includes LGBTQIA folks, and it includes people who work or study at institutions known for a culture of genius. Google, Amazon, grad programs, medical programs. These are places where they encourage intellectual competition. They really want you to wonder if you belong because they think you'll work harder. So why are certain groups more at risk? There are some structural reasons involved that may contribute, such as inherent societal structures of sexism or things like that as far as for women. But what it really all boils down to boils down to is that representation matters. If you don't see someone else who looks like you doing what you're doing, you will question if you actually belong there or not. If you're the only person of color at the boardroom table, if you're the only woman in the meeting, these things matter. And so it makes you question if you really belong. Are you filling a quota? Or, was there a hiring where they're looking to diversify? And so it can make you doubt whether or not your success is actually due to your own efforts. So we're going to talk about 5 different types of imposter experience. Throughout this webinar series, you'll note that I go back and forth between the actual name, which is imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. But really, with 82% of people possibly experiencing this, it really is an experience, and it's one that is much more common than we think. And you'll see that as we go through the 5 different types, these archetypes of imposter experience. There's a lot of overlap in the ways that it can make you doubt yourself. So the first type is perfectionists. These are people who they can get something right 99% of the time, and that one time they make a mistake, it's going to make them feel like a failure. Anytime that they can't do anything perfect, it's not good enough. And it can make them question whether or not they're actually competent at what it is that they're trying to do. Another type is the expert. An expert really wants to know everything ahead of time, which can be really hard if you're starting a new project. Obviously, you need to learn a little bit about it as you go, but this is someone who they really want to be able to check the boxes of knowledge. So they don't want to speak up in a meeting if they're afraid of looking stupid and don't already kind of know what the answer will be. This is also somebody who's always looking for new certificates or trainings, because those certificates and trainings prove their knowledge. And so they want to be able to point at that and say, look, I do know this. And that's a way that they're trying to alleviate their imposter experience, but it does kind of feed into itself sometimes. Another type of imposter, this is a natural genius. And sometimes we can see this a lot in higher education. This is somebody who maybe didn't have to put in a lot of effort, either in high school or their undergraduate. And now in a grad program, they really have to work at a level that they're not used to. And that makes them concerned that they're not really good enough. I shouldn't have to struggle. I've never had to do this before. I guess I'm not that good then. And we see that a lot in graduate school and higher education. Another type is the soloist. They don't want to ask anybody for help. They should be able to do it all on their own. Asking someone for help means they're a failure or a fraud, or that they're weak. And you can see how sort of these all have little bits in common with each other. The different types of imposter experience. And the last one, these are the superstars. They have to work harder than everyone else, and they have to succeed in everything, at work, as parents, partners, any facet of their life. They have to put that gold sticky star and say, yes, I am killing it. And if they can't do that, or if they get 4 sticky stars in a row, Monday through Thursday, and Friday something goes wrong and they can't get that Friday sticky star, that makes them feel like, oh, it's not worth it. It's not good enough. I'm not good enough. So I want to take a moment and ask everyone, we're going to put a poll up here. Do you recognize yourself in any of the above descriptions? So I'm going to ask everybody to take a second and either pick the one that feels most like you, or if there's more than one, feel free to check more than one, because we're going to come back to this later. So I want to see what everyone thinks. I put this little guy up here because he's in the photo and he doesn't like it. It can be hard to realize that, this is how we operate at work or at school. But I do want to let you know that if you did recognize yourself in one of these imposter archetypes, you are definitely not alone. There have been people at the top of their field considered geniuses who also have this experience. So I want to take a moment and go through some other people that have had struggles with imposter syndrome. One of these people is Maya Angelou. Now, she's known as one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. And this is a quote from her, and she says that I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out. Another person who struggled with imposter syndrome, before there was even a name for imposter syndrome, was Albert Einstein. And he said that the exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. So that's kind of reassuring, at least to me, that the person who kind of, made a huge difference in how we view modern physics thought that he was pulling one over on everybody and that they were going to find out that he was not as intelligent as they were giving him credit for. And this last one is Maureen Zappala. Now, she was a literal NASA rocket scientist. And she said that for years, I thought NASA only hired me because they needed women. I felt underqualified and in over my head. I worked long hours trying to prove myself, and I was too afraid to ask for help because I thought if I'm really as smart as they think I am, I shouldn't need the help, and I should be able to figure this out on my own. So you can see, even from these quotes from these, highly, highly intelligent and successful people, you can see how those archetypes we talked about show up in some of these quotes about being found out or feeling like you can't ask for help. On the other hand, they are at the top of their field, and sometimes that can feel reassuring, but sometimes it can also feel a little bit out of reach. Like, okay, well, Maya Angelou, of course, she's a brilliant writer, so she can say this because she has all that stuff to back it up. But a lot of us do struggle with imposter syndrome. So I want to take a moment. We're going to watch, it's a very short video. I think it's 5 minutes maybe. And this was done, I believe, within the last 2 years. And this is young women of color sharing their experiences with imposter syndrome and the ways in which it shows up in their lives and how it affects them.
Thanksgiving episode of the show Masters of None. Angela Bassett plays a mom. She's a mother to Denise. She turns to her. She says, honey, we're minorities and we have to work twice as hard to get half as far. For me, imposter syndrome, there was never one big moment. It was all kind of like smaller moments. One of the first ones I felt was I went to a very diverse high school. There was like Latinos, Black people, Asian people, Indian people. And I ended up going to college in Providence, Rhode Island. I went to this liberal arts college. I was there on a scholarship. And I remember my first day of campus. It was a sea of white people. And I was so surprised. And I just thought the world was like my high school. I never felt such a lack of diversity. It was really shocking to me, and I felt insecure. I think I worked hard because I wanted to convince myself that I belonged there.
To me, imposter syndrome is a person who never takes in their successes and always feels like they're waiting on the next shoe to drop or waiting on somebody to find them out. When I started my company, Maybe, which is a stationery company for women of color, I remember hitting these really big milestones. And one of them was I was featured in Essence magazine 6 months into starting my business, and I could never take that in. I could never say, you know what, this happened because I was bold enough to reach out to the magazine. This happened because I started this company from scratch. It was never about what I did. It was about, well, maybe it was just the universe, but it wasn't about my hard work, dedication to making that happen.
My first paid internship was a nonprofit in DC, and it was for an internship program for my college and other colleges in California, and also had a couple Ivy League schools involved with it. I was one of maybe 5 students that had a paid internship, and there were about 200 students in the program. I kept telling myself that I didn't deserve to have a paid internship. The Ivy kids didn't have a paid internship. It didn't make sense to me, despite having worked before and being a politics major and being in DC where politics is such a big thing. I just told myself that it was our kids who I felt were more qualified or deserved it more than I didn't have the same experience that I had. Once I started becoming a manager and leading teams and being, you know, the head of departments and things like that, more often than not only am I the only woman, but I'm the only person of color.
When you're a Black woman, you don't get to be mediocre. You don't get to walk into a place and say, you know what, I'm just going to be all right today.
I think Black women are taught that we are not deserving, as much as I hate to say that. And I think that it's stuck with me, unfortunately. I work hard and consciously I feel that I'm deserving of things, but subconsciously I don't feel that way. I attribute everything to luck as opposed to just attributing it to me. I think imposter syndrome is something that as women of color, we're always going to come across. And it's really, how do you handle it? Feeling alone, you know, feeling like a fraud, feeling like, wait, how did I get here? Do I deserve to be here?
And there's pressure as a Black woman to always be strong, to always be fearless, to always have this hardened exterior, because if we show any part of ourselves that is actually human, then that makes us weak or that makes us less valuable.
I have to keep telling myself that everyone does not necessarily know more than me or deserve to be here any more than I do.
These are things that I have to remind myself every single day, because if I don't, I'll fall back into this place where it's like, okay, wait, what happens when somebody doesn't think I'm good enough? Or am I actually good enough?
There's that old saying, fake it till you make it. And I just kind of try to do that, you know, until I realize I'm not faking it anymore. I'm just slaying it. There's this really pivotal.
Oops. So you can see how imposter syndrome, this really has the potential to impact a lot of different areas of our professional selves. And what's unfortunate is sometimes this can bleed over into other areas as well. The main impact of imposter syndrome, besides for the continuous feelings of self-doubt and being a fraud, you can become afraid of taking on new challenges or opportunities. If you're constantly worried that you don't, that you're not at the level that you're supposed to be at, or that everyone thinks you are, and you don't want to be found out, you're not going to, you know, apply to lead a seminar. You're not going to go to a conference. You're not going to, you know, send an email and reach out to someone who could be a really valuable person in your field for you to know. But if you're not comfortable with your success, and if you're not feeling like you earned it, you might not think that you should go for anything beyond it, which is something that we want to engage with, and we will talk about that more in each of these webinars. A more serious consequence of imposter experience could be burnout. Now, burnout is not just being stressed. Burnout is the result of stress. Burnout is a state of mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion from excessive and prolonged stress. Now, take a minute to think about this, because it's really important that we be aware most of our waking hours are spent either at work, or engaged with, as students, engaged with either work or education. Subtract the time for sleep, and most of our time is spent in these environments. If this environment is causing you to have self-doubt, to be afraid of taking on new challenges, and you have this prolonged excessive stress, you can burn out. And what burnout does is it kind of zaps your enthusiasm. It can make you feel helpless, hopeless. It can make you no longer feel invested in what you've been working for. And you kind of just, it's not a zone out, but you get to the point where you just can't connect with it anymore. And it leaves you feeling really kind of despairing. We're going to talk much more in depth about burnout and ways to hopefully prevent it in week 4, but it's something that we should be aware of as we talk about this imposter experience. So what can we do if we feel like imposters? And I love this little heart and brain comic, and The brain's saying, well, maybe it would be easier if we put this down, the self-doubt. Maybe that would help us get to our goal. So one way that we can do that is by challenging our automatic thoughts. So automatic thoughts are just exactly what they say. They're kind of thoughts that pop up in our brain without us actually taking the time to analyze those thoughts and to think about whether or not they're really true or accurate. So I put this little graphic up here. If you want, you can take a screenshot of it and kind of work through those options. But really a very, very simple way of challenging your automatic thoughts is simply to add yet to the end of them. So I want you to think about the difference between these sentences. I can't do this versus I can't do this yet. I don't understand versus I don't understand yet. So using yet actually holds space for the part of us that knows that we are capable. And it's really important for us to hold on to that hope, because we wouldn't have got to where we are without our hard work, and we are deserving of success, and we are capable of success. And so when you see these thoughts pop up, I'm not enough, I can't do this, this is too much. If you can add yet, it's just one little step where you can start to challenge those thoughts and give yourself a bit of mental breathing room, basically. Another way that we can engage with some fair self-assessments is to find a mentor. A mentor is definitely someone whose opinion you value and trust. It could be somebody at your level. It could be somebody who's higher up in the organization than you. It could be somebody who's not even involved in what you're involved in, but it should be somebody who you trust. There's a great quote, and it says that you should never accept criticism from someone you wouldn't go to for advice. So if this is someone you would go to for advice, you can also trust that their criticism should, hopefully, be valid and constructive. So this is someone who's going to want to validate the hard work you've put in up to this point, as well as they could potentially guide you towards resources or avenues that you might not have thought of before. And it doesn't have to be a formal or a structured situation, capital M for mentor. It can be as simple as just saying, hey, can I run this by you? Do you have time to grab a cup of coffee this afternoon? I need some feedback on this. And so it can really be valuable to have someone who you trust, who is either in the same area as you, or who has the wisdom of experience that they can share. When we talk about evaluating ourselves fairly, we also need to recognize that some environments encourage culture of genius or intellectual competition. And so we need to think about evaluating our environment too. Because if your environment encourages those types of things, it's really hard not to compare yourself to other people. They kind of encourage you to do so. So a more accurate reflection of yourself and your abilities is, instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself now, where you are right now, either in your program or your job or whatever it is, to you when you first started, or you from 6 months ago, or you from a year ago. And I want you to think about how you would fill in these blanks. So I am learning blank, and I can now blank. So I put some examples up here. I won't read all of them, but think about what a difference it makes when you think about, you might be in a cooking class with someone and the person next to you can make creme brulee on day one, but you are learning how to cook. So I am learning how to cook, and I can now make spaghetti and meatballs. I can't make creme brulee, and if I compare myself to the person who can, I'm going to feel really bad about my spaghetti and meatballs. But if I compare making spaghetti and meatballs to opening a can of soup, and maybe before all I could do was put the soup in the bowl, it shows your growth, it shows your progress, and recognizing the growth and the progress that you've made is really essential to be able to continue growing, but also to recognize and kind of internalize how much work and effort you're putting in, and that you do deserve to be wherever you are. And this last tip is keep a list of your accomplishments, or start keeping a list of your accomplishments. And that's a really good way to get a fair self-assessment, because if you make a list of your successes and you'll see in the bullet point the steps you took to get them, you can see how A leads to B leads to C. And if C is your success, it's really hard to say you got there by luck if you're recognizing the first two steps that you took to get there. So it's a nice way to see that all the work that you put in led to your accomplishments. And you don't want to forget the little things here. Mini successes are super important. I put the quote up here: little by little, a little becomes a lot. And that's how we as humans learn. That's how we grow, is little by little. And we build day by day. We build our skills, we build our knowledge, we build our abilities. And so I put this pro tip on there: keep the list in your phone. So no matter where you are, if you're at work, if you're at school, if you're in a meeting with your kid's teacher, and you just kind of feel out of your depth, take a moment and just look at all the work you've done, because sometimes these situations bleed into each other. And you really want to recognize, nobody's here by mistake. Everyone has put in a lot of work, and it can be super hard to recognize that. So this is one way where we can start to acknowledge ourselves. I do want to, before we move into the interactive part, I do want to put this up here one more time as we go through. If you are struggling right now, the Student Counseling Center, we are here to help you. So I put the email address up. You can always email Sherry, or if you want to reach out to me after the webinar is over, we can talk about setting up an appointment. We are definitely here to support you. There's a lot going on, and we want to make sure that whatever you need, we can help you connect with that. And there's also a reminder, next week we're going to talk about silencing our inner critics. And so now that we have those archetypal voices of perfectionism and soloists and superstars, how are we going to talk back to those voices that tell us we have to do more, we're not enough? And so I'm really excited for that. And for anyone who wants them, I do have, you can take a screenshot. I have references for the sources that this information was retrieved from. Okay. So let's talk about it. Is everybody ready?